What's up everybody, David here, and today I'm going to give you guys a couple tips on combining separate drum libraries. Now for example, today we're going to be combining the shells from Steven Slate Drums 4 with the cymbals from Get Good Drums Modern and Massive. This has always been something I've been weird about just because I always thought you would lose like the cohesiveness between the drums and it would just sound like some random cymbals floating over some random shells. So I recently tried this and it went pretty well actually. So I'm going to give you guys a couple tips on a few ways to still make things feel cohesive and sound like one drum kit inside of one room. So let's jump into the DAW and get started. Alright, so before we get started, we are going to be using my song Resurrect as the example here. And just in case you like this song, if you like what you hear, you can get this song and the multi-tracks to mix for yourself for free. I will put the link down in the description below. So the song is available on all retailers and all that good stuff. But if you guys want the multi-tracks to mix this for yourself, once again, the link will be in the description below. So check that out. And I don't know, you might have a lot of fun. So let's get started. When I originally started this song, I was using the Get Good Drums Modern and Massive, and they just kind of weren't working for the song, kind of wasn't getting what I wanted, specifically out of the shells. So I then decided, okay, I'll use the cymbals from Modern and Massive and I'll use the shells from Steven Slate. So that's what I did. And I've always been kind of weird about combining drum libraries because I was just always worried about losing the cohesion in the drums and in the feel. And yeah, I've always been kind of iffy about that. So I just decided to try it and see what happened. And it worked really well. It really did. And I learned a few things about what kind of helps with cohesion and what helps it feel like one kit, even though you're combining two different kits, if that makes sense. So I just want to show you guys what those things are. Now, what I learned is that it's super important for me, especially, to get all of the cymbal and room sounds that I can possibly get. So for example, I have the plain overheads here. I have the room mics for the overheads. I have the overhead mics for the shells. So this is going to be Steven Slate. And then I also have the room sound, the room mics for the shells. So let's start with the overheads. I'm going to play you the entire kit with just the overheads. Then I'm going to bring in the room mic for the cymbals so you guys can hear what that does. Now, upon combining these kits, I noticed that I really like the room sound under the cymbals. Now, it just makes it a little more cohesive with the rest of the kit. It adds space, and then it also adds weight to the cymbals so they don't turn out to be just thin and tinny, weak sounding cymbals. And it just added a lot of presence to the cymbals as well. I really liked what that did there. So once again, I'm going to show you that difference, but this time I'll show you on the entire mix. Let me find the intro. Cool, so I'm going to mute it again, I'm going to play the entire mix, and then I'm going to bring that in so you can hear what kind of difference that makes. Now, it's not some crazy difference, but it just adds a little bit of presence, and from what I hear at least, it adds some excitement to the cymbals, which I really like. I guess the only downside you could say is that maybe you lose a little bit of the stereo image and the separation of the cymbals, but I don't know, that's totally up to your taste and your preference. You could always dial this back and make it less noticeable. I personally like what it does at the levels it's at now. You could also bring it up more. If you like more roomy cymbals, you can do that too. But maybe that's not even just a downside. That's just personal preference on how loud you're gonna want this track. So next we have the overhead shells. Now, this is from Steven Slate, and this is the overhead mics for the toms, the kick, and the snare. Now, I'm kind of weird about my snare and overheads actually. I see a lot of people that throw like a L1 or L2 on overheads just to pull out the snare. I don't like that. I actually really like the sound of the snare in the overheads. I feel like it adds a little bit of magic and just some spice to my actual snare direct mic. So I usually like that, and it was really cool having the overhead shell option without all the cymbals, so I could really dial that into my drum sound. I didn't even do much. I just did some EQing, pulling out some ugly frequencies, and then I just blended it into the actual mix, and it sounds super cool. So Once again, I'm going to solo the drums. I will take out the overhead shells. I'm going to press play and then bring that in. To me, that just makes the snare absolutely come to life. And once again, it brings space to the drums as well. It brings, you hear the snare a lot wider in the mix as well. You hear it on the sides, you hear it spread out. And I think that sounds really cool. And once again, it brings more of that cohesion that I was worried about with combining kits. So once again, I'm going to play the entire mix and I'll mute that overhead shells and then we'll bring it back in and see what it does. Now inside the mix, to me that makes a little bit bigger of a difference because the snare just cuts through much more. And what's cool about these overhead shell mics as well is it's not just helping the snare. So we're going to go to a section with the toms and I'm going to mute the vocals. I'll just mute all the vocal buses here. Cool. So we're going to shut this off and see what it does to the toms as well. So once again, we'll first start soloed and I'll shut it off and then turn it back on halfway through. Now there's two things that does to the toms that I really like. One is it brings more attack into the toms. You hear more of the actual stick and the actual attack, and it helps it cut through into the mix. And then two, it gives you more of the actual note of the tom. You hear more of the actual tone of the drum, and once again, that's going to help it cut through the mix. So as you're probably guessing, we are now going to listen to this in the mix. So I'm going to mute this, and then I'll bring it in halfway through. So like I said, it brings in that attack, it brings in that note, and it also just gives more space to the toms just like it did to the snare. Now, I think these drums turned out really well. Everything blends super good together, and it feels cohesive, which is just like what I wanted. And adding these couple elements just really helps the drums, especially stand out in the mix, and I thought that was really cool. Now, I know those weren't game-changing. It was just a room track for some overheads and then a overhead track for some shells. But I just specifically noticed that it really gave the drums a lot of space and a lot of room, and it just helped it sound like it was one drum kit in one room, which was exactly my goal and exactly my concern when combining drum libraries. At the end of the day, it's just me saying get all of the sounds that you possibly can when combining drum libraries, because then with more information you can create a better picture of the drums and just overall get a better result. On that note, guys, I hope that helps you out today. Make sure to leave a comment down below. Let me know what you think, and of course, don't forget to like and subscribe because I post new videos every single week and you don't want to miss any content. And of course, don't forget to ring the bell to get notified when I post new videos, and yeah, I think that is everything. So thank you so much for watching. My name is David, and I will see you next time.